All right, welcome back to another great episode of Dr. J Radio Life. Of course, I'm your host, Dr. J, broadcasting from the city of angels, or city of lies, city of demons, whatever you want to call it, city of BS, whatever you want to say, folks. And of course, today we have a great show. We only have 1 hour. Let's make it a good one. Hold the questions till the latter half of the hour. That way, the guest can get across as much information as possible on this topic. Now, I labeled this New UFOs and New World Disorder. And so let me introduce first our guest, the one and only Ed Komarek, right? Komarek. I said that properly.
No, thanks for having me on.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Thank you. Now, tell me what New World Disorder is.
Well, basically, the old world order kind of put a new face on itself, and calls itself the New World Order. It goes back to Levitsky or whatever, back in the early theosophists, way back in the late 1800s, where a teacher there talked about the New World Order, but it was a positive thing, whereas the people that call it the New World Order today is just the old world order with a face that's really I don't know, fraudulent, I guess, or whatever, because it's just the same old world autocratic order.
You know,
Not a new true New World democratic order.
when I first heard New World Order, it was from George Herbert Walker Bush. I did not like the sound of that. Sure, if we are dealing with other species, we have to be united, but at the same time, we have to take care of our own problems first before we start funding on other nations. But that's on another topic. That's more about
Mm-hmm.
politics. Now, define
Yeah.
exopolitics, because I have actually contributed to Michael Sala and his
Mm-hmm.
group, and so because there's some people here that may have not seen it, I want you to define it.
Yeah, well, Michael and I actually came up with the name in public of the Exopolitics Institute, and Michael said he had already come up with it, in private, but I was the first person to come up in public, and I worked with him to build the Exopolitics his, Institute in the early years, and then I moved on, and basically, it's I've been in the field for, I guess you have too, for over 50 years. And it kind of evolved from, UFOs to extraterrestrials and then to exopolitics. And that's kind of the same way as you had with ecology. I have a background in ecology because I was born into a family of early ecologists. And the first ones were involved as collectors, and then they got out in nature, and they saw that there were relationships going on between plants and animals, and so the field of natural history evolved into ecology. Well, it's the same way with exopolitics. Once you realize there are many different extraterrestrials interacting with each other, then and in relationships, then it's the same thing as with ecology. Is that you have this much more complex interaction going on, and also presumes that there are extraterrestrials, and so you're not endlessly arguing about whether UFOs are extraterrestrial or whatever. So you can move on in your thinking.
I think now it's more safe to say that there really is, especially after the DoD released the footage. Even before that, remember the Mexican footage, the military footage of the flare, or that they took with FLIR, explained away
I'm
by
not.
the skeptics as I think oil wells or some BS, something like that. But it was something that the Mexican government thought it was important enough that they handed over to people like Jaime Maussan to investigate.
Mhm.
And of course, these things do not appear to use our technology.
Mhm. Yeah, and it's already a given for people like Michael Sala and myself and whatever. We've moved on. Our main interest is who's in the craft. What are their motives? What are their agendas? Who do we want to align ourselves with, and who we don't want to align ourselves with? Because it's terribly important that we align ourselves with the right types of extraterrestrials, just as the same as that we as human beings on Earth align ourselves with people that are beneficial to us and not ones that are predatory and are interested in harming us.
Now, let me ask you this. How did you get started in UFOs? How did you literally start writing? I think it was over 200 essays you wrote in several publications on UFOs.
Yeah, at a certain point, I started a blog, and so I did a lot of, put over 200 blog articles, and now it's more of an archive. I'm not really writing blog articles. I kind of put all that information into my Exopolitics book, and basically I got started fairly early in life, and I went to the University of Alaska for a couple of years, and I'd been to one local college a year before that, and back on a little back street in Fairbanks, Alaska, in the middle of winter, there was this little, I bumped into this little New Age bookstore, and I opened the door, and it was nice and warm. It was probably 60 below zero outside, and it was nice and warm, and the smell of incense, and there were all these books on psychic phenomena, UFOs, extraterrestrials, near-death experiences, all this sort of thing, and I just was drawn to it. And then this kind of, over a period of a year or two, kind of brought about an existential crisis for me, in which I really became then involved with the search for enlightenment, and that was very closely connected with UFOs. And so my enlightenment insights, I put into my enlightenment book, The Long Hard Road Enlightenment, The Long Hard Road to Enlightenment. And my UFO material, I tried to condense down from all my blog articles and everything else into the UFOs, exopolitics, and the New World Disorder. And then the third area that I'm experienced in was fire, because I grew up amongst a family of fire ecologists. And as you know, people out in the western United States and Los Angeles don't understand fire very well, and have suppressed fire for decades, and now it's all blowing up, and people are, the homes are being burned up and all this kind of thing. And so
that's
the third book I wrote is Fire in Nature.
Yeah, that's an understatement that we don't know about fires. We definitely have them every year at this point. It's no longer if they're going to happen, it's when they're going to happen. And we pretty much know at the end of summer, leading up through December, even sometimes in through January. We'll see this year. We've already had so many homes destroyed and so many people displaced. It's kind of sad.
It's so unnecessary. And it all goes back to a fire exclusion policy back in the early part of the 1900s that was promoted that fire was bad for the environment, which was a very, very big mistake. And my father and his associates fought the Forest Service and other bureaucrats out in California, of all places, to try to get fire back into nature. And here in the Southeast, we have a pro-fire culture in which we control burn or use prescribed fire very frequently, and we have very few serious wildfires. Where in the western United States, this policy of fire exclusion has caused a huge buildup of fuels for decades that now is exploding into catastrophic fires much harder than normally would happen, because what happened is when the Indians were removed, what was left of them, and put on reservations, you lost your native fire managers who were burning frequently all over, not over the United States, but all over the world doing cultural burning. And they kept the fuel loads down low so that the fires were not that severe and easily managed.
Well, now, have you ever seen a UFO yourself?
Yes, what happened was that's my existential crisis. I started reading the literature, and I would spend like a whole winter. I'd work up in Alaska for Alaska Department of Fish and Game, and then come home and read about a book a day in front of a little fireplace in a cabin that I had built on the plantation where I was raised. And from reading all this material, I got interested enough to build up my own local intelligence gathering network by getting in the local press, and people would call me, and at a certain point there when I was very involved, this is maybe from about a 50-mile radius of where I live here near Cairo, Georgia, Tallahassee, Florida area, I would get a couple of calls of people having sightings every week. And after a while, I realized that these sightings were clumping up in places, and I started going to these areas, and I started meeting people that were associated with these UFOs, and that's why I saw my first UFOs, because I was there with a couple of contactees that were operating north of Cairo, near on Egg Road.
Contactees as opposed to abductees, right?
Yeah, these well, one of them was both an abductee and a contactee. She had relations with the Greys, which were just like the typical Gray types and whatever, blood on the sheets and all that kind of stuff. And I kind of got to know her and interviewed her, and I put up a display at a local library, and she got in contact with me, and I interviewed her. She was really, really in a bad situation. And that night, in the middle of the night, I was woke up out of a deep sleep, and it was like there was maybe 5 buzzing bees that were very angry, and they said, "Stay out of it. It's none of your business." And I said, "Whoa, what am I getting myself into?" And I said, "Okay, you guys, talking about guys higher up, you guys take care of this. This is too much for me and whatever." And so I kind of dropped her. And then about a year or two later, she came back, and she was having much more beneficial interactions with the Nordic extraterrestrials, which are operating in this area.
Human-looking,
later
right?
I found
Nordic-looking, human-looking, like, right?
Yeah. These were the typical blonde-haired Nordic extraterrestrials,
yeah. Perfectly built, 6 foot tall, right?
What?
Perfectly built, 6 foot tall, long blonde hair, blue eyes, right?
Yeah, just looked like us, but much more. The men were very handsome, and the women were very beautiful. And but there was also another type here that wasn't as involved on this planet, and they said they had they were from a planet about 12 light years away, and I just noticed that NASA's come up with there is a planet something like 12 and a half light years or something away that has the atmosphere and may be Earth-like. But that said, I found another contact that was connected to this contactee, and he was working with a short barrel-headed chest type of extraterrestrial human that he had met down in the swamp when he was fishing, and they had the creek or something had like sides on it, so their craft didn't pick up on him that he was there in the middle of the night fishing. And they came down and were getting some water samples, and he stepped out from the tree, and they started to run back in the craft, and they made a mistake. All of them were out, apparently, so nobody was inside the craft monitoring what was going on. So they started running up the ramp and looked back at him, and he started laughing and says, "I just want to give you a hug." He was just a really very low on the income scale, whatever. He even had to burn off skin cancers off his arm and stuff and whatever. And he just struck up a friendship with them. They came back down and laughed, and he developed a friendship with them and started flying with them, and even running errands for them, because it's easier if you got somebody on the ground, And I've even found him collecting used clothes and whatever for them, so that they could wear them when they came down and maybe infiltrated in parts of our society here locally and whatever. But they were here kind of like a tourists, really, tour groups of Earth or whatever. They weren't as involved as the Nordics.
Do you think that the Nordics or any other groups that are able to at least have images that look like us move into our society?
Yeah, I don't think that they don't have any problem because they look like us. Some of the humanoid types that don't, may have more of a problem. But I was told by this one contact person that they even, when Walmart was closing at night back then, this was back in the early '90s and whatever, and they would, come beam in or come into Walmart and walk around just to see what it was like. And what happened is then I started having, I never met them directly, but I had all these things happen to me that made me feel very confident. In fact, they would, my friends would actually shoot me video of their craft and stuff and let me see it, and then they'd have to erase the tapes because the
really?
ETs didn't, they had their security concerns, and they wouldn't talk to me. I was told by this one contact that I had a big mouth and I'd get on the internet and I would create a security problem for them. But I've created quite a bit of a problem for the flight, the squadron flight commander out of Moody when he had a bunch of his planes up there up near Moultrie, where one of my two contactee friends were living, and they were flying like a bunch of bees over our head, and the ETs, the blonde ETs, would flip on the light, show that they were there. They were just playing cat and mouse, around that whole area. And I got on the internet and wrote the whole thing up in a blog article and about what was happening. And the next night, the Air Force came in and dropped flares all around my contactee's house. The flight commander was not very happy with what I did.
Why would he drop flares? Interesting.
Because just showing that he was upset of me going on the internet and breaking the news about what was going on there. And before that, there would be two jets would fly around for, I don't know, half hour or two, and then they'd have to go refuel, and two more would come, and they would just do these lazy figure eights there, just monitoring the situation, because they knew the ETs were in there. But they didn't have the insight that I had, because I was dealing with the people that were actually interacting with them. And one person was even going on their craft. And
abducted or contacted? You mean willingly went in their craft?
Yes. He became friends with them, the little short barrel chested types. And as far as the blondes, Marianne had contact with them when she was a child, back in the woods when she was playing one time, and then they came back into her life, and kind of when she was having a lot of trouble with the grays or whatever, and it kind of pushed that back, and whatever that she was having there with the grays and the blood on the sheets and all that kind of stuff and whatever. And basically, I just put myself with my own little intelligence gathering network right in the middle of all the action. And Marianne and I and this other contact, we were sitting in the yard, and the craft came in as like a big, like a stop sign, big red light with a little purple in the middle. And as it slowed down and hovered over the swamp, the light got smaller and smaller, and it was just one little light on what looked like looking at an aircraft on the edge with navigation lights on the side and just a little red light. Then it got up and moved just a little bit. Bright red light got brighter, so it had to be connected to the power plant on it or something. And then it slowed down and hovered again, and then bright red light got real small again. And then I tried to take pictures. I had film that was 1600 ASA, film, and it's shooting across the field at night. You could see the windows, the light coming out of windows of houses and stuff really well, but the craft itself wouldn't show up on my film. And that night when I came home at 12 o'clock, what happened is he went down to meet him. And my friend Marianne and I followed him. And Marianne, who really wanted to meet this particular type and whatever, got really scared and said, "I'm scared, hold my hand," and she wouldn't go any further. And so I was dealing with her. And then he comes back out laughing at the way Marianne was reacting to the whole situation, And then that night, as I live south of Cairo, about 15 miles or whatever. So they followed me home from north of Cairo, about 20 miles, I guess, altogether. And I lived on about 60 acres of land at the time near what is now Birdsong Nature Center. And as I pulled in my driveway and started going down to my house down there, I saw the two red lights go over the corner of my property. So they followed me home to see what I was doing. And then I had experiences with the television cutting on in the middle of the night by itself, and this old movie, The Luck of the Irish, of these little people riding out of the side of a mountain. The coincidences of that was just fantastic for that to have happened somehow accidentally. It was just fantastic, as well as going out in the field and being scanned and then seeing pictures, that my friend had taken of me being scanned, of light swirling around me. So they studied, I surprised them by being there, and they got a little concerned, and they were having big issues of their own, because the contact person told me that one of their kind, not the barrel-chested type, but a more humanoid kind, had been caught and was being tortured and interrogated in an underground facility out in the western United States somewhere, and they were trying to get him back. And eventually, I think they did get him back, but he gave out information that they didn't want out to the military. And so, I was the least of their worries at the time. And I think they just got careless because they were upset about all this. And so it allowed me to see the craft and everything.
The 3 videos released by the DoD in, I believe it was the winter of 2017, 2018, almost 2 years ago, what do you think did to everyone? Because obviously people who've already known that these come and have been abducted, contacted, or have seen them, known have been ETs or other craft, but then it opened up the whole ball field, showing that, one, the government is showing us that they don't know really what the hell's going on, and 2,
well, that's just BS. The government doesn't know what's going on, and they're just running a propaganda operation to try to inform the public a little bit, continue to spoon feed the public. In fact, one of the center of guys there is CIA.
Interesting, because they're basically the inventors of propaganda. Actually, you could take it back even further than that and go back to Nazi Germany when they
and Operation Paperclip and all that. And the CIA has admitted that they have their people in all major newspapers, and media all over the country, and they control the narrative. So what happened? When we held our demonstrations in Washington D.C., we really made a big stink in the media, and on July 3rd, 1992, and that went all over the country, and they did everything they could, right from the AP, Harry Rosenthal, who I talked to and gave this information to, turned it around, and when I was saying that 20,000 pages of the government's own documents prove there's a UFO cover-up, he turned it around and said I was looking for 20,000 pages. And then when we had our demonstration, he wrote another article, and he was really harried, and he went around and finally found one kind of nutty person, and he wrote a whole trailer on the article on us to try to discredit it by putting it at the end of the article. And some newspapers around the country just dropped it because they saw what it was. But I think he was just operating under auspices of the CIA and the AP and the New York Times, and maybe the Los Angeles paper. They all carried this big time. You can go back and look it up, and you can see the trailer in the New York Times of this Natra that was supposedly flying around, and whatever. It sounded kind of nutty the way that he had written it and everything else. And so they went to a very concerted effort to discredit us. And when we had a demonstration in front of the GAO offices, they did the same thing, and some of our people actually went up and talked to the Washington Post people, and they said they didn't see there was a problem. Well, in this discrediting article that they wrote. And so it's very obvious that they were all operating under some kind of a policy, which is probably, CIA, if you go back to the Robinson panel and all that kind of stuff in the past and whatever. And so what happened? Something happened just here a couple of years ago when somebody somewhere decided to change that policy, because here you have the New York Times and the AP and all these spreading this all around about the Tom DeLoach and the sightings and and everything else. So the big question is, what happened? Why did they change their policy? Why did CIA change their policy? And now they're having this controlled disclosure with an emphasis on threats, which kind of benefits the military.
First, let me give a shout out to Justin T for the super chat. Thank you, Justin, and the Blue Crew. Cheers to you too as well, and God bless you for keeping us alive, and blue skies to you as well. Let me ask you another question here. There was something in the chat about, is there a secret space program?
Oh, of course. I mean, you can go back to the timelines. You start with Tesla through Townsend Brown, early German saucers. You can see the documents on the early German saucers. The only thing is I don't think, I was in a discussion here on Facebook the other day with Art Greenfield, And and my conception is that the Germans had been able to build these craft with these capacitors inside, but they didn't have the power to they didn't have the kind of power plant needed to run these capacitors that was small enough to go inside the craft. So they had to charge the craft up, and the craft would fly, and then it would have to come back down. Well, Art said they had some other kind of power plants and whatever, but in the declassified document in 1956, on Wright-Patterson document on electrogravitics, they talk about that they were solving that problem. That was in 1956. That problem with the power plants, and then you have another timeline. You come up with who was the guy who was working with the alien on flight simulations of craft in 1959. Are you still there?
I am, absolutely. I'm hearing. Okay. I'm listening. Everything you're saying.
Okay. Of the what was his name? He was working. I'm getting strange sounds from my phone right now.
You sound clear here for me on my end.
Okay. A little bit distracting. Okay. Bill Uhouse. He was working with an alien on in 1959, I think it was, on flight simulators for flying saucers. Okay, so that's the next little notch on the timeline, and then you have Charles Hall and the Tall Whites, which I'm sure you're familiar with.
Yes.
Early 1960s, who were transferring technology that we could travel to the moon and to Mars and stuff and whatever. They wouldn't give us our deep space technology, but they were giving us, solar system technology and whatever. Okay, and you go ground out the timeline. Then you had the case, of the Crash Landing Room case that got irradiated with military helicopters around the craft and got radiated by radiation. So I figured there was a breach.
Diamond-shaped craft, right?
Yeah, there was a breach in. I think it was a breach in the nuclear reactor, and that's how come they got irradiated. It was one of ours. Okay, and you just go on up the timeline, and then you had the first leak that I saw that I've seen of the 6 carrier craft, the solar system space fleet of 6 carrier craft, a bunch of protectors, and a whole bunch of scout craft, whatever, that Navy fleet or whatever. And that actually came out in the Open Minds Forum before McKinnon, 2 years before McKinnon came out.
Before he hacked, right? McKinnon, right?
Yeah. So, and also when he hacked, he hacked into NASA, and he got into some of this material and whatever of non-terrestrial officers,
That's
and
right.
Also whole numbers of craft and whatever that didn't exist on this planet. And he got in a lot of the details, but that actually had been leaked out about 2 years before that. And then I got involved and found more people that had information on that. So there's no doubt in my mind that we now have a secret space fleet. Only thing, and also this was alluded to by Rich, with Skunk, head of the Lockheed Skunk Works.
Yeah.
Right. That anything you could think of, we'd already had it, or it was just too much trouble to build it, and that we could take ET home, as well as some of his associates that also talked too.
You also said something was wrong with the equation. We fixed it, right?
I forgot what that one was. I forgot what that was.
It was during the same speech where at UCLA, the alumni of the engineering department, when he gave his presentation and showed a disc at the end, when he said we now have technology in the Nevada desert that is better than
Matrix Lucas Drool.
Yeah, exactly. Better than Star Trek or Star Wars than you could imagine. Things are stranger than you can imagine. And also he said that there was a problem in the equation and we fixed it.
Yeah. Well, the only question, that I really have, I have no doubt there's at least one space fleet, and I would assume by now there's probably several space fleets, probably being run by the Navy. Just like Star Trek is interesting, the craft on Star Trek are Navy, and the guy that consulted on the warp engines was a German that his father during the war was head of propaganda in China. And he was brought in under Operation Paperclip in 1962 and rose up really high in NASA as post jammer. It's all in my book. And he consulted on the warp engines on Star Trek. So you can see how even Star Trek is actually a propaganda operation, which involved very high level people that were moving that forward. And the interesting thing about Gene Roddenberry was where I saw the craft. The Roddenberrys there's a number of Roddenberrys here at Cairo, and Gene Roddenberry is related to these Roddenberrys. And where I saw the craft was on a Roddenberry property.
Interesting.
and so you got to put all these pieces together. So I mean, we've been played from the get-go on this. And my question is how many space fleets, how many carrier craft do we now have? The last I heard was 6 or 8. But my main interest is how much of a deep space fleet do we have going to other star systems? Because I'm sure with what Ben Rich was saying, whatever, we've probably got exchange programs, going on with other extraterrestrial races on other solar systems by now. And I would really like to know about that, but I don't have a lot of information on that.
Do you know if anybody has been contactee or abductee have been taken to an ET's home planet?
Oh yeah, there's a lot of books contact books that have been written, and the question is are they believable or are they credible? And the best source of information is that Albert Rosales has pulled together human and humanoid sightings from about 100 for the last 100 years into a database, and actually put them in print books now with have been actually put in print books. But you can look up Albert Rosales humanoid, and he has 15 or 20,000 of those cases that he has compiled. And a lot of them are just like farmers, out in their fields, and a craft comes down, and ETs come out, pick up soil samples, get back in the craft. The human ETs take off and that sort of thing. So he's got, maybe 20,000 cases of human or humanoid types that being recorded by history. If you just go, if you sort through all that, and I did quite a bit of that for my book and whatever, you get a pretty good indication of what the different types of extraterrestrials that are on this planet. We've just got preoccupied with the Greys and the reptilians and the Manus types or whatever, because they're so intrusive on our civil liberties and our rights, and basically think of us as property. And long time when I was a young man, about the time I was going through my existential crisis, I was out in the field and I looked up to the sky and asked, "Who are you, or what's your relationship to us?" And I got this telepathic message, and I think it came to my friends too, is "We are to you as you are to your garden." And I didn't really like that too much. It wasn't what I expected. And so we've got the types that think of us as property, and then we have more ethical, more advanced types. And so you have a dispersal across the cosmos of predators arising on their, through natural evolution on other planetary bodies, and then moving out into space and interacting with each other. And I can understand that from from being an ecologist and whatever, that this is what's happening, and as these top predators on other planets evolve into space and whatever, then they encounter other top predators, just like what we're doing right now. And there's that kind of distribution, which is kind of a lateral distribution, but we have this consciousness distribution where extraterrestrial races, and we are too, are on the scale of consciousness. And like, I don't know if you've ever heard of the Hawkins scale. And it's a scale from 0 to 1,000, and we're at about 200. 80% of the population is at 200, and just treading water. And when you get above 200, you really start making the advancements consciously and whatever. And so these ETs, that I think that the blondes are Nordics are basically GMO humans. They're genetic engineered. They told my friends that they were like twins, because the two men were operating working on studying animals, and the two women were studying plants. And they said they were like twins to my contact people, but I think they're GMO humans, and their society is run by AI supercomputers that have quantum communication. So no matter where they are in the universe, they're in instantaneous contact with each other. And these ETs fight too. You know, I got cases in my book or whatever, you know, of ETs shooting each other down.
Interesting.
Whatever. And in fact,
so real Star Wars we're talking about here.
Yeah, in fact, the two lady Nordics that were, you know, I think there's a lot of presence of the Nordics here operate on this planet, and a lot of what they're doing is what they're doing up here where I am in my area is they're just maintaining databases, you know, of plants and animals, environment, pollution, people, everything. So, and even if you got a lot of machines and stuff, you know, it's useful to have people, you know, working with the databases and whatever. So I think they maintain databases on us, and ethically and morally and genetically, where they're much more advanced than they are, and they don't get along with the reptilians and the Greys very well, because the Greys are low on the consciousness scale, just like we are. So they relate to us probably to them just like they relate to us, whatever, because of our lower states of consciousness. But a couple of these ladies, actually one of them got injured in a fight. I was told by one of my contact people with a reptilian race that came from 3 different planets, and this race had overpopulated its planets, and they were, you know, eyeballing us and are involved here and whatever. And I think they're connected with the Greys and the Manus types and whatever. So you got to understand that there is a lot of life in the universe, and it's all going on in everybody's backyard, you know, all over this planet. And there's many different races. They don't necessarily all get along with each other, and some are much more advanced, both technologically and emotionally and mentally and spiritually than we are. But there's only so much they can do. Even if they wanted to help us, there's only so much they can do. And this kind of came out in this book. Let me get it right here to see. I'm sure you may have even interviewed this guy or something or whatever. Selected by Extraterrestrials by William Miles Tompkins.
No, I haven't, but I've heard that name before. I've heard that book before, too.
He died now. Michael Salo worked a lot with him, and he's dead now, I think. But he talked about how these extraterrestrials, which he believed to be extraterrestrials, were these very beautiful secretaries that were working in the early stages of our saucer programs way back in the 40s, and starting with Douglas Aircraft and on in. And he actually did some of the drawings and stuff for these carrier crafts of the Deep Space Fleet way back then. And so he was involved in all this. And it was really kind of funny because, you know, apparently the Nordic types used women to interact with all these men because they could be, you know, men were would be a lot less hostile to them than they would be to other men. But it was clear that they were exceedingly intelligent, much more advanced than we were, and they were trying to move our space program forward, which seems to be because they're spread pretty thin across this sector of the universe, and they could always use a little help for us to take care of our own security. So I think they were wanting to help build up build up a space fleet and whatever. Whereas the reptilian types and us didn't want it to happen, and there was this interaction going on that he describes in the book. You know, his book's called "Selected by Extraterrestrials" by William Mills Tompkins. And I just talked to Art Greenfield, and he's got a contact that he got on the email with and talked to him, and he confirmed that William Tompkins was a real thing. And you know, we got to talking about that, and that guy said he had been on a base on Mars. I think was a contact that Art Greenfield has on Mars for 20 years or something like that. and he had seen these really beautiful women. But he couldn't say they're extraterrestrial, but he said they're extremely beautiful and very smart. And so it looks like that's how they were, working to move our space program forward. So we can't take all the credit for our space fleets.
I don't think we could take a lot of the credit, literally, for the last 120 years. If you look at what happened at the turn of the 20th century to what happened at the end of the 20th century, my God, there was so much. It's unbelievable. You go from 90 or 900 AD to 1900 AD. What do you see? Not very much change. But yeah, you see a little bit here and there, but not really that much. But it's astronomical there, very exponential from there on.
Yeah. Well, think if you were a tall white extraterrestrial, out there at Nellis Air Force Base where your base is, that Charles Harrell's talked about, and I feel very confident that it's for real because I went out there. I got so interested, I went out there myself and found new sources of information that confirmed parts of his story.
Charles Hall talked about Area 52 or 54.
Mm-hmm.
Which one?
Yeah, well, he says there's a gray base on there too on Nellis, and I'm not sure that the Roswell crash may have, they may have been operating, the Greys may have been operating out of that base too, but it's separate from the tall whites, and the tall whites don't like the Greys, and they'll kill them if they find them anywhere close around their children. And the tall whites are fairly, autocratic.
They'll even kill humans if they find around the children.
They're very secure. Yeah, they're very security conscious and whatever. But imagine a tall white sitting out on a cliff watching the wagon trains come into the western United States. This lady that was the diplomat, for the tall whites or whatever, the ambassador, she was there when Madison was president.
Wow.
So you can imagine where somebody that lives for 800, 900 years old, sitting on a cliff and watching the wagon trains go into Nevada and the Indian Springs and all that whole area, and then how fast it is all developed. It's like we're the fruit flies of the galaxy. We don't have long lifespans, but we make a lot of what we got.
Yeah, that's true.
Very short, but it means also, fruit flies are very adaptable because their lifespans are short, so they can adjust to changes very quickly. So there are some advantages to being the fruit flies of the galaxy. But I think that's what amazes some of these extraterrestrials that live for 700, 800, 1,000 years or more is how fast, we can adapt, to change our changing environments.
There's a couple questions here for you. Tommy Shutter wants to ask you if you know about Wes Bateman.
About who?
Wes Bateman, Bateman.
No.
Okay. Mr. Pritchard asks, have people gone through some types of change over the last few hundred years? Why is there a need to continually make things better and better over the last 100+ years?
Oh, you mean why we continue to develop our technology?
Better shit every year. New iPhone, gotta have it.
Yeah. Yeah, well, basically, we're infatuated with technology, and the problem is our spiritual development, our ethical development keeping up with technology, or are we like, children playing with matches?
Yeah, that's true. We really don't even know how to operate.
And so who's really pushing this? I don't think the ethical types are really pushing, are really helping move this technology forward. Nothing like what I think some of the ones that are more predatory, because I think they want to keep us kind of in a matrix kind of a situation where they can control us and or can use us in various ways for genetic material and other things and crossbreeding and all that kind of stuff. GMO studies and that kind of stuff. I mean, it's like our human DNA. We have a lot of we're down here with all kinds of microbes and diseases and everything else. So we have really strong immune systems, kind of like the Neanderthals that we inherited some of our genes from. And so I think when you start dealing with GMO humans and whatever, you get into hybridization problems, like my dad used to have with corn and whatever, where you lose some of your hybrid vigor. You lose some of your ability to fight off diseases and have a strong immune system and stuff like that. So I think they are mining us for that, different types of extraterrestrials.
Nicholas Cashmore has two questions here. Do aliens visit a certain type of person, and do aliens want to help our spiritual growth?
It depends which ones you're talking about. We're the top predator on this planet. We're very predatory, even amongst ourselves. And some of these ones, like apparently the reptilians and the Greys and the Manus types, are predatory, and they're preying on us in ways that we can't comprehend yet. And they want to keep us in a lower state of consciousness, and that's where they are, is in lower states of consciousness. So it's a matter of raising your consciousness. If you're going to be angry, you're going to be upset, and you're going to, hurt others and be hurt and get, caught up in violence and all that, that's really low consciousness stuff. That's just exactly where you want to keep your prey. Like a fox is, a fox likes to hunt a rabbit that's not paying attention, that's messing around and fighting with squabbling with other rabbits and stuff and whatever, because then you catch them. And so, it's important to keep prey distracted and easy to catch. And so they are preying on us in ways that we just don't, or we're not conscious enough to be able to understand yet. But there are more advanced types that not only have their own interests in mind, like the Nordics or the Blondes, but they also have a win-win kind of a mentality, and that they try to help us where they can, but they can only do so much. If you got a friend that's really screwed up, how much can you really help that person? Maybe when they hit rock bottom, and they've hit, they're ready to come up, then you can lend them a helping hand, and maybe they're ready to change and to adapt and move forward. But other than that, you just have to kind of stay back, not get caught up in all their suffering.
I don't know. I think we might have asked this from those Lasha Senyuk. Does he think aliens have secret agreements with the government? No, we didn't ask that.
Yes, I think that started way back with Eisenhower. In fact, my father knew Eisenhower. He used to hunt at a quail plantation not close to where I lived here, and my father ran a big quail plantation for John Hay Whitney. They even brought Jacqueline Kennedy out there after the assassination to get away from the press and everything. But I think it's a question, which did he meet first? I think he met with the Nordics first. And the story that I heard from a contact separate than what you've heard, of the state senator and other ones, was that the Nordics landed at a base in the western United States, and they walked up into this hangar. And Eisenhower and his generals and wherever are all in this hangar. And I think Gerald Light was there. He was a religious advisor or stuff, whatever, the church or whatever. And they walked in there, and they were with them for 2 days. And then the ETs, but the ET said that we will give you, we'll give you assistance, moral and ethical guidance, and some technology, but you have to give up your nuclear testing and your nuclear weapons. And
we didn't give them up. That's for damn sure.
Yeah. And the general's thing was we can't give up our nuclear weapons, whatever, because we don't even know these Nordic extraterrestrials whether they'll just, be that much easier for us to conquer. So they nixed that, and then they wanted, and then when the extraterrestrials, when I heard from a source that was separate from what's been in the media and whatever and whatnot, was that they told the extraterrestrials said they were leaving, and that they know you're not, and they pulled guns on them, and they walked through the walls and on back down to their craft and flew off. And so we didn't make a very good impression with them. And so soon after that, the Greys saw their opportunity, so they came down and they got involved with us. I don't know whether it was Eisenhower or who it was, and they cut some secret deals with us, and they were Faustian in nature, that if we would allow them to move freely and abduct our people and whatever in small numbers, which they lied about. They ended up abducting people in very large numbers and whatever. By that time, we were already stuck with them. And So this, and so you're in a situation like, or here I am up here in Grady County, and the military out of Moody is playing cat and mouse, trying to shoot down the more advanced ethical Nordics that are operating here in my area, while they're cutting deals and are getting the okay from the Greys and everything else. And so it's just a really bad situation that's very damaging to our whole society, and as well as the whole general secrecy and cover up of this whole thing that's going on.
Now, I'm sure you've seen, and this is one thing I'm showing right now on YouTube, is a portrait of a biblical UFOs, basically Moses having these, the tablets, the Ten Commandments, and in the background you see craft. Now, I've been told, and I'm sure other people know this, and it was even said on Joe Rogan by Jeremy Corbell, that by his wife, that painters, everything they do has a purpose. There's nothing by accident. They don't just put a person in the background looking up with an object in the background behind Jesus or whatever it be. There's always a purpose. So clearly it shows to me that they've been here thousands of years longer than we even thought they would be.
Oh, yeah. Some of them maybe millions of years, or more. But so you've got very, fortunately for us, that the Greys and the Greys and the reptilians and the Manus types are not that evolved technologically. When our people, broke the Japanese blockade around 1850, with steamships in the Tokyo Harbor, and it only took the Japanese 100 years to be at war with us, from sailing ships to World War II. So it took 100 years. So basically, what our military is trying to do, while they keep all this secret and under wraps, and it's being helped by some of these Greys and stuff that drop mutilated human bodies down on top of houses and stuff that Linda Howe has reported on and stuff and whatever, in order to intimidate us to our military to circle the wagons and whatever, and keep more control over the whole situation. And I don't think, with the Greys, we might possibly be able to do like the Japanese, work our way, to being able to up to their level, technologically. But it could also be a trap for our military, and the military maybe get smart to that. And that this whole thing that we can, build up our military and deep space fleets and all this kind of stuff, and be able to, go one-on-one with these ETs that are, being predatory towards us and whatever, really may be a big mistake. That really what we should be doing is working on raising our consciousness, not lowering it to cover-ups and that sort of thing, and raise our consciousness up where we can deal with the more ethical human types, like the Nordics.
What do you think is going to take us to learn that?
One of my favorite topics that I use in my enlightenment book. By the way, people can read my 3 books for free on the internet. You've got the website. It's komarek.weebly.com/ and you got the website, I think, on your page or whatever. And in the enlightenment book, one of the terms I like to use is more suffering is necessary, because basically suffering is a default evolutionary driver. If you don't learn and adapt, suffering will force you to learn and adapt. Just look at what's happening with the wildfires in the western United States. So suffering is forcing the people in Los Angeles area and whatever to face up to it and work on wildfire mitigation and prescribe fire, and put prescribed fire, buffers around habitation sites and whatever, or there's going to be even more pain and suffering. So suffering is just a default driver of evolution. And from the smallest microorganism that makes a wrong mistake, goes in the wrong direction, and gets eaten, to us and even beyond us and whatever. So, so what's it going to take? Just more suffering. Unfortunately, that's the only way I can see it.
Although that's very true. My parents came from nothing, and when they came to America, they found a lot, and they were forced to appreciate every little thing, including water, electricity, things they didn't have in their tiny little villages in Greece. Now, Do you think we humans are ETs? Are we actually
Well, this gets
designed?
I get it this in the Enlightenment book. I'm sure you've done plenty of interviews on near-death experiences and reincarnation experiences, that sort of thing. But mostly that's kind of orientated from Earth perception. But it's my understanding that when you die, you can be reincarnated on Earth, but it might very well be reincarnated on some other planetary system. Like this one guy on the forum back, a few years ago said he remembered when he was, in the womb, and he said, "Oh my God, I've been reincarnated on a primitive planet." And I think if there's issues, like violence and this treatment of others and that sort of thing that are kind of mild, in order to really get down to it, you really got to put the person down into an environment that they can see how bad things can really get before they really start changing their behaviors. So there's this whole larger spectrum of transmigration of souls or of us individuals incarnating in bodies in different civilizations, some more advanced and some less advanced and whatever, everywhere.
Here's another question for you, Nicholas Cashmore. What abilities do aliens have that humans do not? I'm assuming telepathy is one, and maybe telekinesis, but what else do you think?
Well, we're developing all that. Some of our billionaires and whatever say pretty soon we're going to be able to have mind-to-mind communication, and also with an implant in our brain, we can communicate, connect to the internet, and we won't be using these cell phones and all this more primitive technology and whatever. So everything that you've seen in Star Trek and even beyond that, we'll be developing that. And our future is in the stars, and we're just a civilization that is primitive. It's just moving off its home planet, and we're about to interact with a lot of different other types that are evolving from off of other planets and whatever.
It's 2019. We're about to hit 2020. What do you see for humanity?
Well, it's hard to say. It depends on whether we devolve or whether we evolve. I mean, if we can manage to raise our consciousness just a little bit, I think we've got a bright future. But if we play into our lesser instincts and our violence and nature, like you're seeing in politics between the Democrats and the Republicans, and and in Syria and in Ukraine and all this, and we continue those kind of behaviors, it doesn't look very promising for us. But it's actually up. It doesn't really matter what happens to this society. It's really up to what you as an individual, can do with what you got here and what you can learn and what you can evolve and what you can grow from. You can't live somebody else's life, but you can live your own. You can live a better life, a more conscious life with your better angels, and raise your own consciousness enough. And even if this planet we destroy this planet and whatever, we'll be incarnating in other planets, and many of us may have incarnated in other planets that have destroyed themselves and ended up here. So it's not the end of the world or the end of the universe if this society collapses. In fact, that some of the more advanced extraterrestrials have told their contactees it's kind of a natural process that we take if we're not ready to move to the next level, our civilization collapses, back down to the primitive state, and this protects them so that we don't evolve as a primitive violent species and threaten them with advanced technology and whatever later on. So it's a kind of a natural process where the society collapses, under its own weight, or it gets to the point where there's enough people of higher consciousness to move it up to the next level where they are.
Why are the aliens taking our DNA, and what are they doing with it?
Well, we're just GMO. They're engineering themselves. Like the Nordics, are ethical. They're ethical, but they're GMO humans, and that they have, all like perfect bodies. In fact, I don't know, one of the cases that goes way back, I think it was in the 40s or 50s that I got in my book, is that there was a craft that was too close to one of the atomic bombs that was blown up in the atmosphere. and the occupants got fried, and the craft came down.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of these little details are really important because they put things in perspective. And the ones that said, and these were humans, and they said that their bodies were really charred, but what impressed them was that they had perfect teeth.
Interesting.
And so just little bits and
Why?
So little bits and pieces
that doesn't make sense, would it?
And it doesn't make sense unless they were GMO. They were genetically engineered not to have cavities. You know, and genetically engineered to look very beautiful and intelligent and an emotional balance and all that. So, you know, we think of genetic engineering of humans, GMO humans, as something bad, but the problem is that the Germans were picking up on this probably back, you know, in the 30s, and they misinterpreted that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's why you got into eugenics and all that kind of stuff, but it was the whole downside of eugenics. But the upside of eugenics is that you re-engineer yourselves, they become better humans for longer lifespans and for intelligence and for emotional maturity and all these other different things is what they're doing. The more advanced extraterrestrials. Now, the other ones, the lower the grades and stuff, they're messing around. You know, probably they got other planetary systems they want some human slaves on and whatever that they can control and whatever. And so they're using our DNA to hybridize, slaves or people that they can control to do their work on other planetary systems and stuff, whatever. That's low level stuff. That's like still on the level of predator-prey relationships. You know, they're on the same level we are as far as predator-prey, you know, relationships. It's not win-win, it's a win-lose situation.
I know you said you could only do an hour, so I'm going to limit the questions. Yeah. Here's one more for you from the chat. This is from Ronan Soul 9. Do you think Jesus is part alien and taught others how to raise our consciousness?
What?
Do you think Jesus is part alien and taught others how to raise our consciousness?
It's hard to know what happened 2,000 years ago, whatever, and the insights that Jesus had actually go back to early Buddhism. You know, you reap what you sow and all that. That's just word for word of ancient Buddhist texts. If you go, you know, like in Afghanistan, remember where the Taliban blew up the Buddhist temples and stuff in the rock?
Very sad, actually.
Well, see, that was all. The Buddhism was before Christianity, and it was on the Silk Road, and so not just not goods, material goods that flowed just on that Silk Road, but ideas and stuff flowed on that Silk Road, and he was apparently interacting with with people that were traders on that Silk Road and whatever, and so he actually based Christianity on Buddhism and the principles of Buddhism, because if you go back to you reap what you sow and do unto others as you would have them do unto you.
Golden
and all
rule,
that stuff basically built on you reap what you reap what you sow and everything else. That you can begin to see that he just reformulated Buddhism for the Jews of his time.
Now, with that being said, I'm seeing here, I think we caught up with the questions. If you have one final message for everyone, what would it be? And also plug in your information. Again.
Okay. The basic thing is if you really want to move your evolution forward, you've got to become very aware of what you do every day, every moment of the day, and work towards being a better person, as a main effort. And that's what my enlightenment book is, The Long, Hard Road to Enlightenment. We're all exactly where we need to be, learning what we need to learn, and so we can't down somebody else because, they seem to be stupid or something because they won't learn something. That's just where they are. They're in the right time and place to learn the lessons that are being presented to them. So each of us should not fault the lessons, fault the things that are happening to us, but to learn from them and move our evolution forward. And that's what I get involved in the books, and people can read the books, for free. You can read it on your cell phone or on your computer, in The Long, Hard Road to Enlightenment. But they can just go to my website, Komarek, KOMAREK.weebly.com/ or they can go to something like on Facebook, Extraterrestrial Cultural Center, our Operation Right to Know side, whatever, on Facebook. I'm on Facebook. They can contact me pretty easily on Facebook message or whatever if they want to.
With that being said, everyone, thank you so much. And me and Ed are officially signing off.